Today's episode is brought to you by New World Women, and I have the co-founder, Dawn Morningstar, here with me this morning. And just to name a few, there are several people who've been on the show in season 4 who are also members of New World Women. So, Dawn, can you give us that list of names?
Sure, Kelly, I'd be happy to. Dale Allen, whom we all love, she has her new book that's just come out, In Our Right Minds. I'm so excited. And her film of the same name. Marilyn Nyborg, oh my gosh, that woman is a force to be reckoned with in regard to sacred activism and so many other things that she brings. And what a connector she is. And Dia Danu, oh my gosh, she's doing that beautiful work. She's doing her doctoral thesis on dreams from our ancient mothers, right? She probably might say it a little differently, but that's how I understand it. And Dawn Marion, who is an extraordinary human. She was one of our first founding mothers in New World Women, and she does Akashic Records, and she's partnered with Annie Fitzgerald, who's an amazing singer and musician, and they're doing some very powerful work working with women. So you've had all of these women, or will have all of these women by the time this comes out on your show. And so we really truly are a sisterhood, and we're all supporting one another and coming together in ways that really help to create a new world.
Thank you, John. New World Women is certainly the sisterhood that I was looking for. And all of these women who've been on the show this season, I'm really looking forward to seeing what we can do together. For more information, please visit newworldwomen.com.
Welcome to The Girlfriend God, a podcast in search of and in service to the divine feminine, bringing you an equal mix of academic research and emotional spiritual experience. If you enjoy this podcast, be sure to subscribe, follow, rate it, review it, and share it with your friends. Now, together, let's find the divine.
Okay, so welcome to another episode of The Girlfriend God today. I'm really happy to welcome Dale Allen. Dale has for 25 years shared the healing energy of the sacred feminine through her work and her film, In Our Right Minds, guiding women to their strength as leaders, leading men to strength without armor, which has been widely acclaimed at universities, conferences, corporations, theaters, and expos across the US, Canada, from Kauai to Dubai, the UN Commission on the Status of Women, and the Parliament of the World Religions. The film version has been awarded in 19 independent film festivals worldwide. In Our Right Minds is a sweeping journey covered efficiently and clearly in short order, judiciously illuminating the history and relevance of the goddess archetype, as well as its connection to our right brain intelligence. In Our Right Minds garners praise for being well-researched, organized, clear, level, balanced, without blame, and inclusive of all the human family. Dale Allen's YouTube channel is now featuring Women of the World's Religions, the Women's Task Force interview series from the Parliament of the World's Religions earlier this year in Chicago. These can also be heard on the Dale Allen podcast on all podcast platforms. Dale is also a contributing writer in several esteemed books. She's a veteran of corporate, commercial, and creative communications. Her executive resume includes hundreds of voiceover, on-camera, theater, and live presentation projects. Dale, welcome. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much, Kelly. I've been looking forward to this. Thank you.
So right away, I want to tell you that, because the Parliament of World Religions was in Chicago this year, I live 2.5 hours south of Chicago, but the day passes were too expensive. But I did go to the event put on by the organization, I believe, is Women of Faith and Religions, that they put on the day before. Were you there? because I was there.
I was invited to that that sort of parallel experience, that event on the Sunday, but by 7:30 in the morning, I was at the McCormick Center with a screwdriver and a hammer, and I was helping to set up the first ever women's village of the Parliament of the World's Religions, and we really worked all day on that. And then I had to start setting up my interview suite and getting that all put together so that we could hit the ground running on Monday when the Parliament opened.
Okay, because I just kept thinking, you're rather striking. I think I would remember you. It wasn't that big of a room, you know.
I would have, yes, I would have remembered you too, but yes, I wasn't there for that one, although I'm sure it was a beautiful event.
It really was. It really was. And what was ironic is that I went there. I just wanted to go, period. But I also wanted to meet. So I got to meet Liz Kelly, who has a podcast called Home to Her, who was also presenting. She was presenting on a panel at the Parliament. And I got to meet Karen McGrandle, the creator of the Divine Feminine app, who I'm also having on the show this season. So it was fabulous. But what was ironic was that, so we were in circle with the people whose table we sat at. You got assigned a color, and then you went to that table. And none of the women at my table, aside from me, were goddess worshipers. Which initially I was like, but I mean, that's part of the deal, right? We have to be open to learning from the other side. If I can't work from an interfaith basis, I will get nowhere, right? Otherwise, I'm just trying to convince somebody or change somebody's mind. But anyway, so I'm glad that I'm sorry that you weren't there, but I'm glad that you weren't there because I would have been disappointed had I not met you in person. But perhaps you will come back to Chicago someday. So let's talk about the film, which is now, well, let's talk about so when they invited you to the Parliament.
Couple of points, though, I want to make very quickly in
Sure.
response to what you said. Number one, Karen McGrandle is a very dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
I love her, and you will absolutely enjoy your time with her. I'm very proud of her and the work that she's doing with the Divine Feminine app, which you'll cover in another episode. Liz's book, I wrote, an upfront recommendation or endorsement for.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And she was on a panel that I was originally scheduled to be on, but then I was over scheduled, and they had a superb panel, and I worked on the other ones that I was on.
Right.
I also want to comment on you were seated at a table, and the women that were there were not women who were also involved with the goddess, and that was not their spiritual orientation. I went on to conduct at the Parliament of the World's Religions in the interview suite interviews with women of all faiths, all around the world, every. And what I know is, and what I've always felt is that it's all the divine feminine in action. So the divine feminine is love without boundaries and borders and without hierarchy and without, I felt the divine feminine from the words of a Muslim woman, a Buddhist woman, a Catholic woman, a Jewish woman, a Baha'i woman. It was all the divine feminine. And so I have a love of truly respecting anyone's faith or spiritual practice, if it's where they are finding the essential truths of most of the world's religions have at their core,
right,
really beautiful wisdom and messages about love.
Yes.
So the divine feminine flows through all of it.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you tell women? Because I get kind of flustered with this sometimes. So what do you say to women who insist on gendered language and complain about the patriarchy, therefore it's necessary to recognize that power as feminine.
I think you'll have to rephrase that. I don't know that I've actually run into that. It's a funny thing. I go to so many different kinds of audiences
Mhm.
with a way of speaking and presenting that kind of flows like water and doesn't tend to run into resistance. So ask me the question again, and maybe I'll understand it better.
Okay, let me give you an example. So I was having a conversation with an acquaintance. I wouldn't go so far as to say they're a friend. And I was explaining that, intellectually, I understand that God is genderless, right? A non-physical entity. And he said, well, if you feel that way, why do you insist on using the word goddess?
Oh, this is delightful. Thank you for reframing. I'm ecstatic that you did. And it's funny because we're circling right back to the question you were about to ask, which is tell me about the film. The film, and before the film, all of my live presentations always addressed the fact that when I first heard the word goddess, when I first encountered it, I didn't like it. I did not see the need for it.
Right.
Because the, God as I saw it is the energy behind all things. It is something without boundary. It is beyond gender, the creator of all things. It is energy exchanging form. It is the eternal cycle of birth, growth, death, renewal. It is all of these beautiful, ineffable things. What I found was during the time, this period of my life, when this word goddess kept on crossing my path, and I knew I didn't like it because I thought, why do we have to go into gender anyway? But that's when I realized I'm walking around in a female body and I really don't like this word. Let's find out about this. Let's find out. So that's when I started doing all of my studying, and I studied everything: psychology, history, myth, art. I studied the work of sociologists, cultural anthropologists, archaeologists, and I looked at this origin of the goddess. What is the goddess? And the goddess appeared in our human journey to all of our foremothers and forefathers who conceived of the energy behind all things as female. And what I found was the more I persisted in my studies and the more I looked at this lost history of the goddess, and the more I started playing with the word and playing with the pronouns and taking some of the prayers that I had learned in the faith that I grew up in and replacing those to our mother, who art within us, each breath brings us to you. Thy wisdom come, thy will be done as we honor your presence within us. Each day you give us all that we need. Your abundance calls us to give and receive all that is loving and pleasurable. You are the courage that moves us to be true to ourselves, and we act with grace and power. We relax into your cycles of birth, growth, death, renewal. Out of the womb, the darkness, the void, comes new life. For you are the mother of all things. Your body is the sacred earth and our bodies. Your love nurtures and unites us all, now and forevermore. I started to work with prayers and pronouns this way, and it was that activity that caused me to realize just how deeply entrenched the masculine hierarchy had been in the background of my consciousness.
Right.
So even though it wasn't in the foreground, it was in the background, because whether you are of any of the world's faiths, or you have your own spirituality as you define it, or you are agnostic or atheist, you are affected by the thought form of a masculine hierarchical divine being, because it's ubiquitous in our cultures. So you're affected by it. So if someone should say to me, why are you doing this? If this person you were describing, this man,
Of course it was a man.
I would simply say, oh, it could be a woman. Listen, I'm a woman. And
Yeah, that's true.
I didn't like the term. I asked myself the same thing. Why do we need this term? I didn't like it. I would say to him, I hear you. And it would be true for me to say, I felt the same way. But I began to look at reams, chapters, important parts of our collective history as humans, male, female, or any gender identity. We're missing an important piece. And it threads back not only to, myths and stories, religion, religious icons as female, understanding the energy behind all things as female. It also connects with the very structure of our physicality and our brains, which, like all other neural networks going back since the beginning of neural networks, asymmetrical left brain, right brain entity that we are born with. And it is designed to work in balance. And where the brain is working in balance in indigenous cultures and what we can glean from cultures that are gone, as well as indigenous cultures that are still remaining, we see that where the left and right hemisphere is working in balance, where you have, it's not so much about the written word. The divine is celebrated as female, and female, the feminine, is in balance with the masculine. You don't have gender hierarchy, and you have this incredible synergy of the two hemispheres working together. We're so used to being more left brain dominant. You and I are, and everybody listening, we're so used to it. The discourse of our society is around that kind of structure and organization and language. Right. But when we consider, and I've had the opportunity recently to meet some people that are different from us because of where they are from. When the left and right hemisphere work in balance, we have access to an incredible kind of intelligence, the intelligence of the right hemisphere of the brain, which is very present in the body and which understands its relation to everything around us. It's not separate like the left hemisphere. It's not representational and abstract like the left hemisphere. It's present and it's connected. And it feels the connection between you and I. It's our empathetic side. And it's a side that has the oversight, the big wisdom, the big picture, as opposed to the left hemisphere that tends to stay in a very abstract, organized, separate, this is how I see it world. So that's what I would say to a gentleman like that, with a lot of love too.
Yes, of course. I mean, I think my much shorter version of that was, we can sit around and talk about how it doesn't matter all day long, but until I can say the word goddess in mixed company and no one bats an eye, then we still have work to do. Because it's fine, because it's fine to, like I said, to talk about it in theoretical terms. Plus, in my snarky way, I would also say, I fail to understand how few people can grasp the concept that the only thing in existence that can give birth is the female. So why all the pushback about the origin of our species is female? But I know why. And what you were saying, I often reflect on how power hides in plain sight, right? And some of these things are just, we're so used to it, and it is so indoctrinated, and it's so insidious at times. When you were speaking, and when you recited that prayer, by the way, I thought we could end right now. This is great.
Yeah. That's my Our Mother prayer. Yes. Thank you.
And I've heard different different Our Mother prayers over the years. I think the first was Patricia Lynn Riley's, and here and there, different variations, which I say quietly under my breath when someone's saying the Lord's Prayer when I'm in a spiritual circle. But just that, right? Still feel like I have to say that under my breath. That means there's progress to be made still. And I was thinking about how when I have these conversations with people and, it doesn't matter, reminds me of when I was younger, being an out lesbian in mixed company and the pushback of, well, okay, fine, but why do you need a parade? We don't have a parade. I think, yes, you do. You have a parade every day. That's why. It's that normative, ingrained, and it takes work to be able to look at those things and look at our own inherent biases and structures that are in place. That's why ever since this Barbie movie came out, I think it should be required viewing for everyone, not just men, but for everyone, because it's so in your face, but that's on purpose, right? I mean, have you seen it? It's very heavy-handed, but they did it in such a way that I think it was palatable to the masses. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
So I want to go back to the Parliament of World Religions for a minute. So when they asked you to come, was the Women's Village your idea, or was that the Parliament's idea that they wanted to then put you in charge of?
Oh, I will make that clear because I want to celebrate the pathway that was taken. So I was first invited to be a part of the Parliament of the World's Religions Film Festival because In Our Right Minds was accepted into the film festival. So I was really excited and happy about that, knowing it would be shown in a theater at the Parliament of the World's Religions. So I knew I was going. Then I was asked to be a part of a team of women to co-create the first ever women's village. There is in the Parliament of the World's Religions a women's task force that is chaired by Phyllis Curott. So there is a women's task force that has a number of women on it. And then came the idea of having the first ever women's village. In terms of the actual birth of the idea, I believe it was Sandy Hart and Pat Farrow, both of whom worked. They're both on the women's task force. And then it was with them that I joined with another group of women, and we were this subcommittee to create the women's village, which we did. In the process of creating the women's village, and one of the things that I kept repeating, which was really important to me, I said, if I'm Muslim, do I feel welcome there? Right. If I'm Buddhist, do I feel welcome?
Right.
If I'm Jewish, am I welcome? It was really important to me to not make it all about, quote, the sacred feminine, the goddess. It was that.
Right.
But it was that in a way that was embracing to all. So that was a really good feeling. So the idea came to have interviews. And again, that idea to have interviews, I think, originated from Sandy and Pat, because the idea was, how can we have this beautiful women's village, the first ever, and have, nothing to record it or grow out of it? Mm-hmm. So they specifically asked, they said, and it needs to be Dale Allen. And so then I, of course, said, yes, this is wonderful. So we figured out how that could be done. And I went and I set up an interview suite at the Parliament of the World's Religions. It was like a womb.
Yeah.
It was in this corner, and there was red curtains on either side. And there was some of Brisha Kralovic Logan's Women's Woven Voices tapestry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can see it. You can see it when you watch the videos on YouTube.
Yeah. And so I had an opportunity to meet and talk with women from all around the world and different cultures and different spiritual backgrounds. And it was a great honor and joy for me to just receive this heartbeat of woman, this love of woman, and how every one of those women, in one way or another, through their faith, and many of them have sort of a free-form spirituality, many of them are also specifically following a spiritual path, but as women, they are bringing the energy of woman to whatever faith or spiritual practice they follow.
Right.
So it was really beautiful. It was really powerful. So I'm sharing one interview every week. It's actually a huge job. It's huge. It takes time. And I put one up new every Tuesday.
Mhm.
And the women are very inspiring. And my taglines are find your place among these women.
Right.
Because, when you listen to a woman speak from her heart about her love in action, it inspires you to take action as well. It
Right.
inspires you to, put your love in action.
Yes.
So, powerful stuff.
And I agree with how important it is to do that. That's one of the reasons that I loved Liz Kelly's book and talking to her, because we had these conversations about, here, at least here in the United States, we have such blinders on to, like, mythology is the Greco-Roman pantheon, and goddess worship is, you, me, and the witches. And, we forget that it's a very big world out there, and there are goddess traditions all over the globe in hundreds of different languages. And I feel like, this network that we're trying to create, I always try and mention that should be a global effort. I mean, it starts small, like something else that we've talked about on this show, and that I've talked about with the women that have been on this show, is that the goddess spirituality movement looks very much like a bunch of white women. So I try and have some diversity on the show, and I know that other podcast hosts do the same thing for that very reason, right? We can't be the face of goddess spirituality. I mean, we can, as long as there are other faces next to ours. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So about the film, which I loved, by the way, and everyone who I've spoken to loves it. Did you have, just as a side note, did you have a big turnout when you did a showing during the Global Goddesses Grid, the 10,000 Goddesses Global Grid? Didn't you screen the film that day?
I did screen the film that day, and there were many things that happened during that. I did not organize that event, but I did sign up, and I showed the film, and I put it up on a webinar. And I hadn't done something like that in a while, because I had done a bunch of them when I first put the film out. So I had a turnout. I liked it because I loved that there was a woman from Italy who joined, because that's the way, the internet works. So that was good. And then I enjoyed showing the film, and I enjoyed some Q&A afterwards. And then it was time to hurry up and get on to the big event, the other event, and which I scrambled around trying to find the link to, and I couldn't find it. But, over the course of the 25 years that I've been doing this, that represents thousands upon thousands of people, because presenting it live at universities, conferences, expos, theaters all across the US, Canada, Kauai to Dubai, the UN, the Parliament, it's a lot of people. And so I used to present it live. And then COVID came. I was invited to present to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And I thought, well, we're all going to be sitting here looking at our little laptop screens.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to customize the message to this little screen. That was really why it was made into this, film type format. And so it's a nice piece, because that way I don't have to get on a plane and run and do the message, do the performance. It can go out by itself. Right now, I'm looking to get it on, I'd like to get it on a much larger broadcast platform, whether that's PBS or Netflix or whatever.
Right.
Just listened to it again myself. And just to hear it. And I thought, yeah, it needs to go. It needs to get out there, because it still remains well organized. And even, for example, the gentleman that you cited earlier,
Mhm.
you can watch something like that and say, oh, I get it now. And that happens over and over and over and over again.
Right.
My book goes to the publisher, so I have a book version of it. That'll come out in 2024. And what's nice about the book is that I'm able to put even more in it than was in the film. And a lot of the stuff that was in the live presentation can also be in the book, as well as some additional research that has been conducted and revealed since my first writing of this, and about the brain and how the brain works in the right hemisphere of the brain. So that's coming out, and I'm excited about that.
So when you first started working on this 25 years ago, did you ever foresee, one, its longevity, or two, I mean, what it has morphed into? I can only guess that you couldn't possibly have imagined that.
Fascinating, right? So at that time, it was such a big turning point in my life. There was one whole sort of scaffolding of my orientation toward life and my views and my perspectives that was just crumbling. And I pulled my energy in really, really, really tight into this quiet space, into this void for a while. I didn't rush in at the time that scaffolding was falling down to suddenly say, okay, well, now I know what I'm going to do. And it was in that silent period. It was kind of excruciating, actually, because, it's hard to not know what you're doing or what you're going to be doing, right? You don't have a report for people. So what are you up to? Well, I'm actually pulled my energy really tight, and I'm just being quiet right now. I mean, the world doesn't want to hear that. They want to hear, what are you doing? What are you?
Right.
So it was in that quiet time that I first started hearing about the goddess. And no, I don't think I would have known if that this would be something that would just keep on going, because the message remains so very important. And so, I'm kind of amazed that here I am now getting ready to put this book out, and it is time for this film piece to go out too, this film video to go out on a larger platform. I believe and I trust timing. Mm-hmm. And I believe that just, now is the time for it.
Now is the time.
Yeah. Yeah. As for some, there's a lot of fear, right? There's a lot of fear about feminine pronouns for the divine. And I actually speak about the goddess in terms of the archetypes.
Right.
I love archetypes because they belong to all human beings around the world.
Yes.
And no matter who you are, you have this constellation of archetypes. This is how Carl Jung, taught us about the archetypes.
Right.
And to have this so important image of the female divine to be so subjugated and so lost is so damaging to men, women, boys, girls, and all identities in between. Because without this healthy feminine inside of us, we suffer. It's part of all of us. It needs to be celebrated and honored and, healthy and alive. I think about boys, they're born of a woman. And of course, these days, a person identifies one way or another, but the birth happens, a birthing.
Right.
And this is the way all life comes in. And, if a boy then gets to that age where he starts to look at the culture around him, and it starts to become obvious, somehow the women are secondary. That is such a wound to his psyche, because he loves his mother. And what a painful thing to have to watch this goddess that is his mother, this wonderful person, to be like, what? what's going on? How come the women are second? That wounds him just as much as it wounds a girl child. It wounds us all. So enlivening this archetype, this sacred feminine, puts us in balance internally and helps us once again to harmonize the left and the right hemispheric perspectives as well. We lose so much if we don't have access to that.
Yes. And as a person who was raised in a patriarchal religion, I can tell you that those of us who have turned toward a divine feminine path, what a healing journey that is, right? There are a lot of women I've had on the show who were, like myself, raised Catholic, and we all had the same experience where we clung to the imagery and the verses about the Mother Mary because she was our first experience of some goddess divinity. And then, now, all these years later, I know, and we did an episode about it, right, that the Mother Mary is really just kind of an amalgamation of several goddesses that came before her, including Inanna, right? There are things that Mary is associated with that were initially associated with Inanna, like blue, the color blue, and doves, and a whole host of other things. And so what I find challenging and what I'd like to get your thoughts on, Dale, are, in today's culture, with such a short attention span, how do we effectively because I agree that part of what turns the tide for us is educating people, which is one of the things I try and do at the podcast. We have a lot of academics on and archaeological and anthropological evidence, right? And I love being able to point to those things as a tool, right? When someone asks me about goddess worship, I can say with confidence, the patriarchy can really only claim the last 6,000 years, but goddess worship goes back 30,000 years. And we have evidence of that. But again, with such a short attention span, it's hard to get people to pay attention long enough to learn anything.
The short attention span issue is a phenomenon happening on our planet at this time that is causing a very speedy conclusion on all kinds of things without actually going into any depth.
Right.
So also the not having quiet moments of spaciousness. The minute there's a quiet moment, it's the phone. Just having some quiet. Our entire species, except for places where there isn't as much going on with phones and computers, but those places are almost impossible to find now.
Mm.
So this is such a critical point. As I talk about the use of the right hemisphere of the brain, it's in the quiet, it's in the spaciousness.
Right.
Using our phones and the short attention span, that's the short attention span. It's the left hemisphere of the brain. I mean, it's just all right there. It's very surface. It's information moving very quickly. So do I see things on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook that are, images of the sacred feminine? Yes. And am I happy to see that? Yes. Yes, I am. Because art and artwork and images of the sacred feminine and little tidbits, because most of the time that's all people will allow is just a tidbit of a moment.
Right.
Is there value in it? Yes, there's value in it. Yes. And my hope, and I'm sure any of us that are doing this, is that by having that exposure that comes up more quickly, that it just calls a person in to learn more. I even think about how having this film piece that I have available, because are people even really reading books, right? I mean, it is, yes, right, exactly. So, I think that it's good to have any images of empowered, healthy, beautiful images of this holy, sacred feminine, honored, revered, and respected. To have those out there, yes. To learn more, I just think we need to keep on meeting people with the tools to learn more, So I just keep going. I also,
So,
one other thing I want to say too is that if you do have the privilege of having small people in your life, children, infants, babies, children, try to be a model. Try to put down the phone.
right.
And try to look them in the eye and be present and do something, with them, be with them in a way that, lets the clock go away and lets the time open up, get out in nature, cook something together, make something artistic together, play, it's really important. Really important.
And I have friends that have young children that are intentionally trying to raise them that way. They play board games rather than video games, and they play because I've read these scientific studies that, I mean, it's really altering our brain and creating new synapses and letting other synapses die, which gives me pause, but I tend to be a hopeful person. So, the technology, I don't know, either the technology is going to fall apart or, you know what I mean? Something will prevent us from becoming automatons, because the goddess is more powerful than that. And I try, anybody that knows me knows that doing the social media content and making those little 30-second, 60-second clips is my least favorite part. But I realize that when I spent a phenomenal amount of time creating the videos, like if you go back in my Instagram feed to the 5-minute, 6-minute videos, nobody's watching them. Nobody's watching them. So that was kind of a hard one lesson. And I will ask people if we're having dinner to put down their phone politely, but you're right. I mean, I always feel like I have to be an example to others, regardless of who they are and where I am. I just want to be an example of a loving, kind, generous person.
And there you've just hit it. Because everything that we do, there's all this thing, you're out there, I'm out there, we're putting things out there, but always remember, Kelly and Dale and anybody listening that, to help the world, starts right at home.
Right.
With you and your family, your loved one, that's where it starts. That's the most important contribution to the planet, is a, loving and thriving, home, or your closest relationships. That's the most important. And all the rest of it is our efforts. But, it's all got to come out of this beautiful world that we are creating in our immediate breath in, breath out life.
Right. So speaking of that, do you have a formal, or formal is the wrong word, structured spiritual practice? Do you pray? Do you meditate? what does that look like for Dale Allen?
Everything. Everything. Everything is related to my spiritual practice. Everything is related to what am I, doing on this day in my incarnation. And if I get off track and I realize that my head is up into the next, oh my gosh, I've got to get that, email out, or I got to get that video up. And I'm like, been taken so out of the present moment. I do stop myself, and I need to stop myself, and I do. So, and focus, and it's a lot of surrendering, right? Just like let go, let it go. Because I can work, I can really get to work. And when I really get to work, it's pretty amazingly formidable, because it's like bam, 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 bam,
Right.
really worked on. And in that, I like to work by myself, and I just like to get it done, so that I can kind of, ease out again. Yes, I do pray. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. All the time, all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. Really, with like around so many things all the time. And the way that I pray is, it's with an in-breath and an out-breath. I do also draw on, I have a background, I was raised inside of Catholicism. And so there's like this DNA, ancestral memory and feeling of Christ consciousness. So I love the whole message behind us being born into these bodies. I always love the, what I do, you can do. This is what it looks like when you remember that you are, born of the divine,
Right.
and of course, for me, it's, every child, every birth, every child is the holy child. Oh, hear the angels sing. When I'm on stage, when I was doing all this work, and still now, not as much live, but when I talk about the sacred feminine, I talk about uplifting the feminine, it's very easy for me to feel the, Christ consciousness saying, thank you, that's great, keep it going, good work, it's needed, because all of that is so honoring of the feminine in its true essence.
Right.
So, for me, yes, I walk every day in nature. Nature is my cathedral, unless it's really pouring rain. But if it's freezing cold, I'll be out there. If it's a misty rain, I'm out there. Being out in nature is really, really important to me. And, the whole thing is one big prayer. It just
Yes.
really is.
No, I think there's something to that. I mean, I do pray all day long, just as everything could be a meditation.
Yeah.
That it
Yes.
is.
Yes, and I'll say, sometimes I'll say, because there's also power in ritual, right? So sometimes I'll
Yes.
say, in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, in the name of the Mother and of the Daughter and of the holy blood and bone I am. And then, I'll speak whatever it is that I'm praying about. And I'm also, I'm so aware that there's a mouth talking right now, and there's this animation of this thing happening, but most of me just simply is not here. And you can't use the pronoun me. It's ridiculous. It doesn't even hold, it gets strange even using that pronoun, I or me.
Right.
But we have to have some kind of organization here to communicate with ourselves.
Right. I mean, I feel that I do. I mean, I'm a big law of attraction, Abraham Hicks person, and one of the things that Esther Hicks says on a fairly regular basis is the majority of who you really are isn't here, right? You were born into this earth, into this physical body, but most of you is still there.
Right.
And that belief that we really are all one, and therefore a part of the divine, kind of the theory behind conversations with God, right? That God created everything that God wasn't, right? So I have this kind of messy visualization of just this amoeba type thing that was there in the beginning that sloughed off a blob, right? And then that blob became another blob, and that's how we got here. And our suffering comes from not remembering that. That's my understanding of what suffering is. And I talk about being out, I feel, because I do consider myself a dedicant, and I'm fairly religious about it, right? But I also believe that, I always say the goddess is something without outside of me, but she's also within me. Like, both things can be true. So sometimes I have an inner goddess that gets whatever I need to get done, but I also am having a human experience. And that means that sometimes I struggle. And when I struggle, I want to be comforted and nurtured and have somebody hold me and tell me everything's going to be okay. And I get that from the goddess, right? Like, I have to have some higher authority that, even if it's not true, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I believe the goddess has a plan for my life. Maybe that's not true, but I believe it. And that's what matters to me, right? I mean, it directs the choices that I make, and the fact that I do make an effort to, I mean, I have the luxury of being able to meditate and pray every morning. And I know that that is a luxury. I can tell you, when I had a job, I didn't do that. So I'm not going to give somebody a hard time for not being able to do it, because when I had a job, I couldn't do it either. I'm only doing it now because I have that luxury. But, or maybe I would be doing it given where I'm at in my spiritual, you know what I mean? Sometimes I sell myself short. Maybe I would have still carved out the time to do that. But the point is, I really believe that we need to make that time, especially meditation. It is the only opportunity we have to turn off the mentality that is ingrained in us, which is to, especially here in the States, right? It's all about the go, and the hustle, and make the money, and take care of my family. And we are a doing culture.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I hope that is changing. I mean, I see some evidence of that changing. I look at the youngest generation, or who are hitting like their, late teens, early 20s now. And the ideas that they have, I mean, if I'm ornery, I'll complain about them and they're all snowflakes and they need to whatever. But mostly I have admiration, because I think these kids are fearless. They're fearless. My niece, when she was 22, she went to Thailand by herself. And I think I never would have had the courage to do that when I was 22. They're so fearless, but they're just so willing to stand up and say, why is that like that? You know what I mean? Rather than just accepting the status quo. And that's what I see in the young people of today. Like,
yes,
maybe we don't have to work 9-to-5 jobs and kill ourselves for a 1-week vacation while we complain the whole time that it's not long enough. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way. And I go, you know what? You're right. Maybe it doesn't.
Hmm.
It's remarkable. They give me hope. That young people really give me hope.
Yes. So a couple of points there. So a sense that there's a larger picture, and a sense that, I look at the major and the minor arcana of the tarot, right? So the minor arcana is the day-to-day, the this and the that, it's the left brain, it's the self-identity, it's the activity of an earthly incarnation. And the major arcana is that part of us that is, for lack of a better term, but the simplest term to jump to would be soul, right? It's all the part that isn't, it's beyond so much more than this incarnation. And so having a sense of a larger worldview, you were talking about a sense of the goddess being both in body, but then also something that is, transcendent and beyond and bigger. And I am a voice for the archetype of the goddess for the sacred feminine, because the human species needs this feminine energy to be honored, because we are all made with balance. We are all made to have this feminine energy honored, flowing through this, whether we're a big male warrior, or a woman, or anybody needs to have a balance of the feminine. And again, that is also a balance of the left hemisphere, which is that day-to-day, that self-identity, that the thing that we see, it's constant chatter in our minds, just goes, words. We're just nonstop dialogue. Whereas the right hemisphere is beyond all of that. So the right hemisphere is not, stuck in this tiny little identity, this day-to-day, this time-bound, reality that we tend to, it's kind of all we see. You talked about meditation. Meditation is a great way to get into the right hemisphere of the brain, to detach from that constant inner dialogue of the left hemisphere, that self-oriented, abstract representational world, and instead into the all. It's right across the corpus callosum. We all have it. It's there. And it connects us to the present moment, the in-breath, the out-breath, all of the cosmos, the body of awareness, the sense of connection with other people. So it is all of that balance. And you talked about young people. And yes, there is courage, and there's this amazing ability that they have to connect with all the world because of technology. The big thing is that we help them to also stop, pause, back into a kind of, meditation. In small children, it's play and it's presence. And it's, again, getting out in nature, playing, that sort of thing, just to access that right hemisphere of the brain, so that we don't all become, now it's like everybody's got an avatar, like it's like the picture in the phone is more real than the actual person.
Right.
So we're at an interesting point right now. But like you, I am also an optimist. I'm going to keep on speaking about the feminine, because my fellow humans need this message. They need this, the speaking on and the sharing of the feminine energy. So, with respect to the masculine energy as well. So, it needs to be done and needs to continue. And then also, with our young people, I think the more we start to recognize the impact of which perspective, which hemisphere we are looking at the world from. How are we attending to the world? We're either attending to the world via our left hemisphere or our right hemisphere, and they're very, very, very different. And I think that young people, it's almost like a magic wand. If they are empowered to understand that they have a left hemisphere that they're really familiar with, it has their identity and their name and their day-to-day and all that stuff, and it's in the phone and it's in their avatar and it's blah, 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 blah. But they also have, like, almost like a magic wand, just across the corpus callosum is this right hemisphere of the brain. That's their birthright and their gift. And it's magic. It's amazing. It sees so much more and is connected to what we would have thought was so separate from us, this big divine world somewhere out there. It's right here.
Right.
That's where it's all one. And that's where we're.
And they're kind.
Yeah.
That's what I see in young people today. They're kind.
Yes, I've met many a kind young person indeed.
Yeah.
Yes.
And seem to have an awareness of the needs of the people about them. You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like a return to, when I grew up, I was taught about things like, like you help the old lady across the street.
Yeah.
They seem to have that, right? Like, we've returned to that kind of 40s, 50s mentality, which, in a lot of ways, returning to the 50s mentality isn't good, but in that way it is.
Yes.
Is. And I'm often amazed by their kindness, and they make me want to work on that part of myself that can still be really judgy, or that's how I judge my own spiritual condition. I know how I'm doing by how much judgment I have when I walk out into the world. Now, I'm at least evolved enough that I don't have to say everything that comes onto my mind. It always cracks me up when people are like, I just have to say, and I'm like, do you though? Do you have to say that? Or do you
Yes.
have to say that to me? You know, um,
Or even just to be able to pause, when you witness yourself
right,
getting frustrated because you had to call an 800 number, you had to get, when you got in whatever causes you frustration, or it could be
right.
in driving. I'm pretty good at driving, I gotta say. Staying,
I'm
you
way
know,
better at driving than I used to be. I
yeah,
used
nice
to
kind
be,
of Zen mode, got to.
yeah,
But at least, it's that self-awareness. It's every time you say, oh wow, I can replay the moment I was just in where I was triggered in one way or another right
right,
now in this exact moment, and I can send love to that. I can
right,
really send love to whatever that was. It really does correct the energy. It really does send a healing balm to whatever it was. And if there was another person involved, oh, they're touched by that love that you send out. And you
right,
go on to the next thing. I mean, you're having a human incarnation. There's one
right,
going on. you
right,
know
right,
and so it's the constant sort of reference point back to the bigger picture, so that you can kind of love your human incarnation all the way through. Listen, it's not easy to be human. It is not,
right,
because if you are incarnate and you have this left and right hemisphere of the brain, you have all of the emotions, you have all of the frustrations, you have the limited loop that you can get into, you have the repetitive thoughts that humans have. I mean, the left hemisphere goes with the same 90% of the thoughts are the same ones you had the day before, but you did incarnate. So
right,
there's a reason that we came here. There's something beautiful about the whole thing. There's something beautiful about why we would choose to go from the all one into sending part of it here to think it's separate, for the joyful experience to remember that it isn't separate and that we are all one. Decided to do it. Apparently, it was important to be done. The
right.
one, the one totality decided to have this experience. So there's something precious about coming here and remembering that we're actually all one. A lot of times, the way that I see it is, if you imagine like a matrix, and we've all seen these kinds of designs, even in math classes. But if you have this one, I'll say that it's circular, but it's actually kind of twisted. But and then this one thing is all connected. But then if you imagine like these sort of almost like a finger pointing down in, so that the shape is it's hard for me to describe without actually drawing a picture. But it's just that we're all connected, even though we seem to be having this separate thing going on. It's really
Right.
one thing talking to itself.
And that's one of the things I think is changing, is that we are moving out of this separation consciousness, which we've been in for a long time. That's the tipping point that we're at. We're on the precipice of that. And I've talked to astrologers and a number of other people who study these kinds of things who say that yes, that is. I learned about something recently called spiral dynamics, which is the theory. Have you heard of that? So we're in the orange phase now, right? Which is that scientific materialism. But the next phase is where we go, oh, that's right. I don't exist in a vacuum. And the shadowy figures on the periphery are actually other people. And my actions affect those people. And, that kind of awareness is what we're moving back into. And I have seen evidence of that, right? Like you read about these more and more people are following the dream of, they used to think we were crazy when we talked about, let's create a commune and go buy a farm and we're all going to grow our own food. Like more and more people are doing that. More and more people, because of the financial arena being what it is, more and more people are reverting to living with families and multiple generations inside one family. So even though it may be financial duress that drove us to those decisions, I think it doesn't matter, right? The result is what matters, which is all of those things I think are moving back towards a collective awareness rather than a separate awareness. So I want to ask you about one other thing, and then I'm going to get to the 3 questions that I ask every guest at the end of the episode, which if you've listened to an episode, you already know them. If not, they're going to be a surprise. but I wanted to specifically ask you about, so you have one video on your YouTube channel, and it was the now I can't remember what it was called, but it was something about the before birth orientation.
Goes like this. Greetings, magnificent beings of light, magnificent humans to be, and welcome to your pre-lifetime orientation program.
That was it.
Yes. That is.
So what inspired that? Because I'm all about that. I think you are absolutely right. I think we get to make these decisions, and I'm a past life regression hypnotist. I've seen too much and know too much to not believe in that, and that there is an in-between place where we get to choose these parents, these struggles to overcome, this adversity. This is what I want to experience. I joke about that all the time because I have a lot of health problems and I'm overweight. And I say, I must have had the body of an athlete in my last life. And my sacred vow was to say, I would like to experience the exact opposite of that.
I feel, I love using art, theater. I love using these kinds of tools, like even in Our Right Minds, as much as there's so much academic research in it, it also draws upon the theatrical, it draws upon the arts, because that is, we are both sides of the brain, right?
Right.
So when I wanted to share the perspective where, we're back to that majority, the totality of this existence, even though there's a mouth talking and there's blood and bone and a skeleton and it has a name and it has a birthday, there's so much more beyond that. And that is the perspective. So that particular character, if you will, that offers the pre-lifetime orientation program is speaking from the place from whence we all come prior to our incarnation. I'm actually working with a woman about doing a film with that character, really, and about all of especially the research about prenatal, preconception, conception, the in utero experience, and the first years of life and the impact that has on the incarnation going forward. But it's that character who offers the pre-lifetime orientation program, which is funny, right? And I've done that piece many times. And of course, I'm able to switch it up any way I want to.
Right.
People are always hit by that. They're always affected by that, because there's something that goes, oh, yes, I feels familiar.
Right.
Yes. So that's a collective orientation program. That's on my YouTube channel.
Yes, that's where I saw it. So at the end of the show, I ask all the guests who've never been on before the same 3 questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Question 1. Tell me something about yourself that people that know you would be surprised to learn. Or even people that don't know you that well. Some quirk, some guilty pleasure.
I would say that because when I am around others and I'm out in the world, I tend to be worked through, and an energy that is filled with a lot of good flow goes flowing through. One might mistakenly think that this incarnation does not have the fears that everyone has. Because I've certainly heard that before. Oh, you're always smiling, or, oh, you probably, have not experienced, or you don't feel this. And it's really important to know that, of course, yes, this incarnation has all kinds of stuff going on. So
Dale Allen struggles.
Yes, of course. And they're even older than that. They're even older and bigger than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. So that would be important to me. And it is important to me. And I have no problem saying that. Oh, yeah. Yeah. absolutely. This, scary, sad feelings to, darkness, all that. Yeah.
Tell somebody to give somebody the finger at the traffic light,
No, not so much that. More, not that actually.
I'm,
No,
I'm
more,
teasing you,
more
Dale.
actually worse than that. That would actually be easy.
Okay.
Worse than that. Yeah, more internal. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Current favorite television series or movie? I know you don't have a whole lot of free time to be sitting around watching TV.
I'm really glad you asked me that actually, because of my daughter, who's 23. She's pretty good at knowing what's out there. She and I are both extremely sensitive. I can't watch anything that has a negative, just dark worldview.
Right.
I can't. So through her, I discovered the Call the Midwife series.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
We
she
watched
has
that.
seen most all of them, and I've seen a bunch of them, and I really like it. We all arrive through this birthing process, yet it's hardly been talked about in movies or film or or television shows. And there's something incredibly endearing about that show. And it's just it's mothers and babies and fathers and babies, and it's beautiful. So I'm enjoying that. And then the last movie that I saw in the movie theater, which I rarely do go to those, was I went with my neighbors to see the Barbie movie. And I thought, good, that's great. That's great because it's had such mainstream appeal and asks the mainstream to stop and look and say, oh, it's a patriarchy. That was very cleverly done. Very,
Yes.
very cleverly done. So
Yes.
I was happy to see that. So that's my answer to that.
Okay. And final question, if your life were a movie, what would be the theme song on the soundtrack?
Okay. So there's the first thing that's coming to mind is there's a song by Hot House Flowers, and it's called A Thing of Beauty.
Mm-hmm.
If I could play it right now, I would. But it is essentially the lyric that keeps on repeating is, a thing of beauty is not to be ignored. And it's this beautiful song. It's Irish, I think,
Mm-hmm.
band. And they actually have a sound that's somewhat like U2, but I think they might even predate U2. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm familiar with them.
Yes, but I would listen to that song because to me, that is absolutely what it is. That's what it is. A thing of beauty is not to be ignored. Because if
So I do have a public playlist both on Spotify and iTunes of and it's a playlist with all the songs that people have answered this question with. I think I did it for the first 2 seasons, so I have to add season 3, and then I will add season 4, and your song will be on there. And I've only ever heard the same song once. In 3 seasons of Guess, only 2 women have chosen the same song, and now I can't remember what it was.
Yeah,
I'll have to consult the list, but
great.
well, that's a great answer. It's quite an eclectic list, as you might imagine.
Yes, I do.
Okay, Dale, I really appreciate you talking to me today. You are a delight. I'm sure you hear that all the time. Oh, actually, I have one final question for you. So I know that part of what you've done in your professional life is voiceover and voice acting. How does one get into that field? And I ask you that because my whole life, Dale, people have told me that that was what I should do, that I had the perfect voice for radio. I used to, when I was in high school, I would call one of my best friends, Mark. He's like the brother I never had, and we still talk to this day. And his father would answer the phone and say, Mark, Kelly's on the phone, the one whose voice makes me blush.
Oh,
So,
that's beautiful. And you know what? He's right. You do have an absolutely beautiful voice. And that's a great question. And because I've been doing it for so long, I don't know how people get into it now. When I
right.
got into doing voiceovers, had been working at a radio station in sales. And because I could do so many characters, so many characters, I started being called into the studio to do ads. And because I did so many ads, I therefore had a reel. I had a demo piece
Right.
So I left that job and I started going into New York City where I had an agent. I mean, this is how all of it had to be done.
Right.
New York agent to represent me for voiceovers and on camera. And I chose an agent that also had an LA affiliate. So that's, I don't know how people do it now. A lot of things are, online, and I don't know how it works now. I mean, I know I get jobs now because I just get, hey, can you do this job?
Right. I was just curious. It's not something I'm going to go out and do. I very much enjoy not working. So not that what I do isn't work, but you know what I mean. Sorry, I'm just looking at my window, and since I do live here in the Midwest, it's got that kind of green tint that usually precedes a tornado.
Storm. Oh, well, I hope that's not happening. Here we've got a beautiful, beautiful November day. It's coming to be sunset. I'm later than you. Of course, I'm an hour later than you, but it's really, really pretty here.
It was almost 80 degrees here today.
Wow, that's really warm.
Yeah. Wow. But maybe it's just going to rain. I don't worry too much. I mean, I lived -4 years in Pittsburgh. I've lived here for 25 years, and a tornado has never hit Champaign directly. It has hit all the little rural towns around us, but never here. We're in some sort of a valley. I don't understand how we have a valley when it's so flat out here, but apparently we're in some sort of protective valley.
Good. I'm glad. Yes. Yeah, we don't have many tornadoes around here, but anything can happen.
Anything can happen. That's right.
Has been really, really, really nice, and a nice boost as well to the work at hand. So much of it is a solo journey working on things, and so it's really nice to just connect on the sacred feminine. It's really nice to connect on, where our hearts are flowing, which is really flowing out a lot of love for this planet and for our fellow humans, always for the children coming up, always for the next generation, that they can live really happy and healthy and fulfilled lives and feel good about themselves in their own unique expression. That's really what we want. We want to see an earth thriving and a human family, since we have so much influence over everything. We want to see a healthy, happy human family at peace and at ease. Yeah. So thank you very, very much. Thank you for putting me on your show, and thank you for sharing me and my work. You are a delight. You are.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Most days I believe that today.
Yes, good. I'm glad. Yes, you should.
And and it's work that I enjoy. I started the podcast simply because my relationship with the goddess changed my life.
Yep. Me
changed
too.
My life.
Me too.
Saved me from a really dark place, saved me from myself. And I wanted other people to know what she could do. You know what I mean? That there was, especially with the world as it is right now, that there was respite and refuge in the storm of that. Because it gives me such comfort. And I wanted other people to have that. Because I'm not special. I mean, we're all special in our own way, but you know what I mean? Like the goddess, yes, I have a special relationship with the goddess, but so does everyone else.
Yes. Right? It's an interesting thing how, that says so much about you. And it's the reason I ended up also going on this path, because my experience of working with feminine pronouns for the divine, which does have a huge impact on, especially if you're walking around in a female body, but it also matters if you're walking around in a male body, or however you identify. This energy has to come in and flow. It's this heartbeat, it's this love, it's this birthing, it's this beautiful, feminine, empathetic, loving presence that we are made of and we all need. Once I had this experience and it was so transformative for me, I had to share it. So I do it in the way I do it, which is, which is academic as well as theatrical, as well as emotional, but well-researched, all of it. It's just because that's the way it comes through me. But everybody is doing their part. That's also really beautiful. You're doing your part And it's all important. It's all needed. It's all, it's all happening.
All right, Dale. Well, I could talk to you for another 3 hours.
Yeah, same. Yeah, me too. Thanks.
But hopefully now we're running in some of the same circles, and hopefully I'll see you again on the Divine Feminine App's weekly Weavers call. But
Yes.
I am confident our paths will cross again.
Me too. I'm confident too.
But until then, may the love and the peace of the goddess be with you.
May the love and the peace of the goddess be with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Bye for now, Kelly.
Thanks for watching or listening to The Girlfriend God. Don't forget to like, rate, review, subscribe, follow, and comment. Episodes drop every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. and you can follow The Girlfriend God on social media on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook.